positive. The goodwill is there. The signals are good. But I think that the real deal is what happens going forward. Good intentions, good optics are not enough. And for these things to work, I think those of us in the media and accountability space would, in the coming days, be...
Let me know if the others join. Boss. Thank you very much, Manasseh Azure Awone. I'll come back to you. Take this as a preliminary thoughts. Franklin Kujo, I know Imani did a very thorough evaluation of Mohammed's 120 days. I'm not inviting you to take us through all of that, but I just want you to give me your quick thoughts around the leadership and governance commitments and how you assess his first 120 days. Thank you, Franklin.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Manasseh and Professor Ofai. I think that those were very good foundations to be laid. I think for governance, we counted about 9 promises that were made, and we think 5 were completely completed, with 3 in progress and 1 not actually undertaken at all. So you can say that, well, if you look at 5 plus 3. Somewhere around 70% of the governance promises have been either completed or on their way or in progress, really. But let me just take a bite on 1 or 2 of them. I understand that we all know that there was the promise to constitute the leanest and most efficient government under the 4th Republic in 90 days. Well, the leanest, obviously, I think has been achieved. And in terms of fiscal effect, we calculated almost 1.5 billion Ghana cedis during the tenure of the presidency, if those emoluments were taken into consideration. But if you added Article 71 holders, if you added the emoluments, then you're looking at another 1.5 billion or so. So in all, you're looking at a fiscal savings of about 3 billion Ghana cedis. So that's fine. I'm not entirely sure about the efficient aspect of the government, though, because we are here to see, as Manasseh suggested, because efficiency also means that you have to be doing probably more with less, right? If I take, for instance, the promise to fight Galamsey, this government has promised, not actually promised itself, actually, and is likely to disburse almost 50 million Ghana cedis to fight Galamsey, which is a bit more. It's about probably 40–50% more than the previous investment that we made in fighting Galamsey. Now, I look at the optics and I'm not entirely sure that we started off on a good note, because you realize that we asked for a repeal of the LI, right? Now we are hearing some sort of cantata stories that a few certain steps have been taken, and some activists are actually quite angry. So if you're getting 15 million Ghana cedis to fight Galamsey, you better deliver. So we are here to see that aspect of the efficiency in terms of managing resources. I could also look at some of the flagship, initiatives that the government wants to undertake are quite noble, but they are going to cost us a staggering. Find that connection between productivity, public sector reform, figuratively has been given some sort of a desk within the presidency. They probably have no proper locus in holding public sector leaders to account. I say this because, you see, public sector reform has been one of the biggest things in this part of our world. If you realize that the last administration promised that they were going to embark on aggressive public sector reforms and ensure that they were going to increase our oil resources by almost 1 million, which were the pretext they gave the IMF to get off the program early. None of those actually happened, especially the public sector side. And I think that I would have wished that the president had made the public sector reform minister, cabinet minister, so that she'll be given some really wide-ranging powers to be able to hold these ministers to account. Otherwise, well, I think let me just focus on 1 or 2 of the other promises under the governance. I think the issues around the compensation of flag victims is a good thing, but the challenge is not necessarily the flag victims, the compensation. Sometimes we don't normally calculate how much these victims have actually lost. So the compensation package itself begins on the wrong foot. It is important to determine how exactly compensation should be done. And I think that one has to be taken into consideration as you go forward. The other ones, obviously, yeah, code of conduct and all of that is fine. It is important to say that yes, you want to ban political appointees from purchasing state assets, but exactly what type of state assets are you talking about? What's the mode through which they have to purchase? They're supposed to be exempted. So those things also have to be stated clearly. So for us, we think clearly that the governance promises were largely attained, but of course there are still structural issues that ought to be met. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank Kujo, particularly for the 531 that you did. 5 done, 3 ongoing, 1 not done at all. And also the points around flagship programs and their cost, and then the Public Sector Reform Ministry and Cabinet. So clearly there's a lot more you can do when we come to the next round. But let me come to Honorable Kojo Ponkroma. You are MP. Therefore, you are in Parliament, you have the chance to scrutinize the President in a more intimate way. What has been your overview of the first 120 days of Mr. Mahama based on his social contract?
Bernard, so thank you, and let me also thank Professor Ofeabuaji and the colleagues who have spoken ahead of me. I will be approaching this conversation not from the mindset of an opposition MP here to oppose everything, but essentially from the perspective of a member of a party that has just been voted out of power and coming to it with a sense of lessons which a governing party should learn from and should do things in a manner that delivers lasting results. And I like something Manasseh said earlier, that sometimes it's not the beginning, it is when the results are really coming in that you will determine what value you're putting on it. So there are 4 things I look at. Number 1, what is the self-announced yardstick with which we are measuring these 120 days? Are these promises of substance that deliver on the needs of the people? Or these are, placeholders, things that you can call promises and then you can tick that something has been done, but in real sense, it doesn't deliver value. I would like to examine things from that perspective. Number 2, apart from the actual promises that you made, challenges and opportunities have come up. So in particular, the challenges that have come up, how have you been able to respond or address them? And I say that because from our experience, you can come to power with 15 things you want to achieve and even achieve all 15. And then 2 unexpected things can come your way. And if you don't manage them well, it ends up derailing the entire perception of your governance. You can believe that you have delivered on your 25 promises, but if there's 1 or 2 or 3 other things that have come your way that you have failed woefully in responding to it, your 25 don't even matter. Alongside that is opportunities that have come up during the period and how you've tried to take advantage of those opportunities. And then finally, what next? What does the roadmap look like? So I'll be doing more reflections than scoring, and perhaps I'll defer to the scoring that Imani and Manasseh and the colleagues will do. So let's start with the promises. If you look at the 25 promises, a good number of them amount to launching initiatives. In fact, if you go through it, the general, not even your first set that you are dealing with, a good number of them is about convening conferences, is about launching inquiries, is about announcing a ban, is about launching initiatives. Some of them are quite more for seed capital for Women's Development Bank. What does that mean? That means I want it to be accessed, or it will be made available to a particular entity, or it will be printed in the budget. The reason for which I go through this is that if these promises are not promises that really deliver substance at the end of the day, you can take that something has been achieved. And even that something that has been achieved, you will find Imani and the rest saying that they are looking at around an average of maybe 55. If I put what Imani has done alongside what others have done, maybe an average of about 55. But this is 55 of promises like launching Black Star Experience, reopening investigations, launching probes, launching tourism initiatives, launching a Jumura apprenticeship, and 1 million coders. So I think that it is important as people reflect on what this government has done in these 120 days to ask the question, what really did they promise? Is it of value, or are these placeholders and perfunctory things that we have been excited about? Number two, a question comes up about even the measurables of some of these promises. So if you take, let's say, what I'm very big on, jobs, launching a Jumura apprenticeship, 1 million coders. So currently, how many people have been absorbed into the Jumura program? How many people have been absorbed into the apprenticeship program? The 1 million coders program, how many people have actually been absorbed into it? How much actual budget application has been made available to the agencies that will be implementing these programs as at now, beyond the launch? And if you delve into the details, you may find that there is very little there. Take the Women's Bank that I'm very particular about. So which agency has actually accessed the seed money and has started the preparatory works? So that it's not as though we've just put something on the board and we've ticked and then in real sense it's there. There have been a number of positives. If you look at, like I think was mentioned by Manasseh, the goodwill that this government continues to enjoy, they have built on it. They've done quite a number of appointments, youthful appointments that people are happy about. I think Professor Ofe-Abuaje, mentioned even the Council of State, where you have very, very young people getting up there. So their youthful appointments have helped a lot. They've done a lot of good rhetoric and optics. Sometimes the Gen Zs call it settings. So you find something very little and a lot of photos and videos around it to create a good feel. They have appeared to want to open up and engage. But when you go into the details, we don't get the impression that some of those engagements are genuine and are actually translating into anything substantial. So take the National Economic Dialogue. You were there, Bernard. I know some of our colleagues were there. Very elaborate. But for example, if you come into the budget and you say that I'm looking for 4 things that came out of the National Economic Dialogue, I, for example, am struggling to find it. So you will see a fanciful exercise, nice optics, but now when you come look at the substance, you will struggle there. The removal of the taxes, I think they've been coy with it. And let me explain. I've heard subsequent explanations that some of the taxes are tied to an IMF program, so you can't take it. All of the revenue handles were part of the fiscal framework that we agreed on with the IMF. None of them was excluded. But the government found it prudent to take off some and leave some. And why I say it's coy is because they took off the very low-hanging ones that gave a certain populist feel, taxes that affect a particular segment of the population, taxes that don't even accrue as much as the big ones like COVID, which you would have expected that they will take up. And then finally, there are challenges that I think as we go along, we'll see how they've responded to. So I'll do more reflections as we go along.
Thank you, Kojo. You have created your framework. Very interesting, because somebody said to me that the 120-day social contract is the president setting his own questions and answering them. But we can determine the marking scheme. And I suspect what you've done is to create your marking scheme for questions you did not set. So that's quite interesting. Let me talk to AGI. A lot of times people see them only from the perspective of economy and business, but good governance, anti-corruption, leadership are critical foundations for business to thrive. So Seth, I believe AGI has a strong view on our first round, leadership and governance commitments. What are your thoughts on Mr. Mohammed's first 120 days?
Well, thank you very much, Bernard, once again. When it comes to leadership governance issues, it's of interest to us because if you don't have good governance, it has effects. Especially if government is not efficient, they tend to finance the inefficiency through taxes, and then it comes to hit the business community. And therefore, we are always very concerned about the kind of leadership systems we have and how it is managed and bring efficiency. So that is fine. I think, first of all, my general comment is this whole idea of the 120 days target indicators. For business people, they're always looking at what is sustainable in the system? Or how does it impact on their bottom line? So a lot of these issues, sometimes one will say, why should we worry ourselves so much? It's just 120 days. How far will it go? It is the ultimate that we are looking at, the ultimate impact of some of these promises and how they've been delivered. So we may not worry ourselves too much into the performance within this short period, because we all know that it's a 4-year mandate. But having said so, the fact that a president has said, I'm giving some indicators on the basis of which you can measure my performance, and it's giving us the opportunity, even those of us sitting here discussing what the performance has been. For me, it's a positive thing. It shows that we are growing in transparency, we are growing in good governance, so it's all positive. I remember in the previous years, campaign, for example, was not very issue-based, but you could see that in recent times, the last 2 elections, it became more issue-based. People are, political parties are all having manifestos. I remember way back when Dr. Toniedu used to tell MPP, you don't even have a manifesto. Today, all political parties have manifestos and they are bringing out issues. So I think we are gradually moving to very positive end in terms of political campaigning and then what governance should be. So that is positive. On the specifics, I think that a lot of the things that they said they would do by the 120 days social contract, I think quite a number of them have been done, or if not fully done, partially done or tackled. And that for me is also quite positive. The fact that they were able to appoint the ministers within the shortest possible time. The code of conduct has recently been launched. The president coming out clearly to say, I'm banning political appointees from buying state assets. These are all good signs. But as has been said by other colleagues, at the end of the day, they say the sweetness of the pudding is in the eating. To what extent would compliance be? And that assessment will have to be done much later. But the principle of setting up your own indicators and say, measure me on the performance of the indicator that I've set up, and then on the basis of that, monitor my progress in the course of the period. I think that is positive, something that we welcome. The specific ones, as I mentioned, are solid. And then let's see how the implementation goes. But I think we are also reminded of the fact that ultimately it is the impact of these measures and how they are going to affect the business community. If governance is good and we are not imposing more taxes, it is positive, and we are generating a lot more resources based on whatever we already have without introducing new ones. The businesses are always concerned about introduction of new taxes. So that is one thing we need to take note of. And then the fact that there's openness and transparency, and then some discussions. Indeed, I must acknowledge that for AGI, but we have been a privileged one, maybe like others as well, and not only this regime, we are always engaged. Previous government engaged us a lot, and current government is doing, super in terms of engagement. At all levels, we are invited and we are engaging. So I think this is all part of the leadership angle to things, and we monitor to see how the implementation of some of these promises turn out in the course of the year and then the subsequent years to come.
Thank you, Seth. This is the Anatomy of a Returnee Presidency, evaluating the 120-day social contract of John Dramani Mahama, and it's coming to you live from the University of Gold Coast here in Accra. It's part of the Vital Topics series. This is the 1.0 version. I have a very interesting panel, and we've heard from some of them. We've divided the topic into three. We are dealing with governance, leadership, promises. I want to end this round with the person who started us off, Esther, because you did say that while the supply side of social accountability for some of these promises seems to be forthcoming, I think you said we needed to do more on the demand side. I wanted you to elaborate and put a bit of flesh on that, Auntie Esther.
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Bernard. The for me, the provision of the 120-day contract was a clear set of areas in which we could journey with the president and his team, assessing and examining the implications and the impact. As some of the colleagues have said, some of the areas were more, could not be easily measured within the 120 days. I mean, for instance, linking the leanness of the government to efficiency. I mean, you can't measure. So some of it, the measurability was difficult. But what I would have liked to see would have been that as soon as this 120-day contract came out, commentators, civil society commentators would take it up and set their frameworks, their targets, and journey in an interested way in how this was going to roll out and how this was going to sustain over the period. I would have liked, I mean, for instance, this Women's Bank thing, I would have liked women's organizations to take an interest in it and situate it within the discussions around women's economic empowerment. I would have liked to look at the robust code of conduct vis-a-vis what exists, what the implications are. I would have liked civil society to be more interested, and not only the CSOs, the NGOs, professional bodies, religious organizations, even a consistent media commentary. But it appeared to me that in the first week of May, there was a flurry of activity, and with all manner of people providing all manner of comments on what had happened and where it had gone and all of these kinds of things. We need to be interested. We need to be engaged. We need to be able to offer constructive discussion. We need to facilitate information flow, ongoing analysis in ways that citizens can understand, in ways that the effects of these interventions on the doorsteps of Ghanaians can be tracked. Those are some of the issues I'm interested in and I would like to see going forward. A lot of these things, you see, one thing is that people are represented by different parties. They are represented by what we know, assembly members and members of parliament. But traditional authorities, faith leaders, leaders of economic associations, and so are people in whom the citizens have vested some trust, some expectation of representation. So these parties also have a duty of care, a duty of tracking the issues that would affect our citizens in ways that preempt or propose or advocate or build their capacities to negotiate and push through certain issues of concern, taking advantages of the opportunities that open, and also are able to anticipate and stem any inimical effects that may happen as a result of government actions. This is what I want to see, an active interest in governance and responding to what the supply side gives us. Bernard, I hope that answers the question.
It does in a very beautiful way, and it's also one of the reasons why we are here, taking part in an active discussion following the 120-day elapsing. We are live on many platforms, Joy FM and Joy News and some of their partners. We're live on TV3 as well as on Facebook and YouTube. This is the Anatomy of a Returnee President, evaluating a 120-day social contract, brought to you by the University of Gold Coast as part of their Vital Topics series. So far, we've heard from Dr. Esther Ofeya-Boaji, we've heard from Franklin Kujo, Manasseh Azuri-Awuni, Kujo Opon Kroma, and Setchum Akwabwa. For some reason, we have not heard from Professor Bokwin nor from the Minister of State for Government Communications. I'd like to jump to our second thematic area, but I'm going to flip the order of comments because we're now looking at taxes and the economy, jobs, relief or rhetoric. Now, I'd like to ask, did the president set the right questions? and then is it on course to answering them? Because if you don't set the right questions, you may be scoring 100%, but you may be deviating. So, Seth, I'm coming back to you on this round. We listed a few of the promises we saw under the rubric of taxes, jobs, and the economy generally. So, for example, hold a national economic dialogue, scrap e-levy, COVID levy, betting tax, and the rest of them. Remove taxes on agri and industrial inputs. Prepare for the 24-hour economy. Seed funding for Women's Development Bank secured. Launch the jobs program, including Ejumera, apprenticeship and coders. Scrap import ban on salvage vehicles. And ban illegal mining, particularly in forest reserves. Launch the tree and water initiative. So these are the promises we brought under the economic rubric. How do you assess them? Are they well grounded? And how do you rate his performance? Seth.
Well, thank you. Bernard, as I said earlier, the indicators are good, but they are very short-term in nature. A lot of the promises that has been made as part of the social contract are quite for immediate gains. Of course, some reflect in the future as well, but it all depends on how it's implemented. A couple of things have happened. I mean, most of like the National Economic Dialogue that has taken place. Fortunately, we had the opportunity of being involved, so we know how it transpired, and indeed a document has come out. The question will be how this will be implemented and how effectively it will be implemented in a way that brings impacts on the bottom line. Scrapping of e-levy, that has been done. Public outcry eventually has been done. So positive development there. Emission levy implementation had not fully started, except maybe the vehicle one. But today it's been scrapped, which is also positive. COVID and the rest, there's a little challenge here in terms of the delivery, because in terms of the COVID levy, it's been made it's because it's part of the VAT. But if you look at it, those elements of the VAT, they are not really typical VAT issues. They were imposed as part of a levy to generate more revenue for government. And therefore, government's proposition is that we're going to do a total review of the VAT system. And then when it's done, then the COVID levy, for example, will be taken out. That is fine, but I thought that being a policy that really was not part of original structure, taking it out shouldn't have been a big challenge. So much as government has mentioned this and there's plan for it, for the business community, we're looking forward to having immediate, scrapping of it. So I think that area has to be still looked at. The removal of taxes on agri equipment and exemptions, those are all positive development. But we are reminded of the fact that if you take exemptions, for example, I think it's been bastardized a little bit, because we put all the figures together and say government is giving so much exemption, and therefore it's a bit of a drain on the government resources. But I always make an exception for industrial equipment and agricultural equipment. If somebody imports machinery to produce, to use as manufacturing plant, and it's not going to sell, why should you have to pay taxes on it? And therefore, the request for exemption was in the right direction. Somehow, it's delayed so much that we still have people who have applied for some of and we go around the world campaigning for investment on the basis of some of these incentives. So I think that this is something that is in order to remove as soon as possible. And we have to look at the whole or the entire exemption regime to really make sense out of it and see how it propels development in the economy. I think the other aspect that was mentioned, which is also relating to business, and you haven't mentioned, but I think it's also very important, and that's the establishment of the Export Development Council, which the committee has just been set up, and we were privileged to be part of the committee. That I see as very positive development, because you are talking of export development, critical for your economic development. I think part of the reason why our city has not been performing well over the years is because we import more than we export. So if there is a special attention to that effect, that is positive. But in all this, let me mention one thing that has not been clearly mentioned in the first 120 days. Somehow one can subdue that under the National Economic Dialogue, and that is the macroeconomic issue. The macroeconomic environment is so critical for businesses because you don't have control over that. You can have the best of governance of your business, employ the right people, get the right materials, get the right deals. But if the macro issues hits you, it takes you off balance. And I think that is one area that is most critical. And over the past 120 days, I think we all attest to the fact that there has been significant stability in the macroeconomic environment. When we look at the AGF Business Barometer report, we've certainly seen signs of this latter part of last year. At the last quarter report we had, the confidence level actually rose a bit. We are finalizing the first quarter of this year, and from all the indications, it appears we're going to have a positive confidence level. So I think this is positive. Confidence levels seem to be gaining grounds, but what is most critical is the sustainability of this. And ultimately, let me add this, that ultimately, we would like to see, which is not immediate, but ultimately we would like to see the structure of the Guinean economy changing a little bit.
Okay.
We've had a structure of economy where the importance of industry, especially manufacturing and agriculture, has virtually been played to the background. We have service leading, about 47% of our GDP is coming from service. It doesn't make it bad, but if you consider the linkage to industry and agriculture, it is quite alarming, because the service bit is being led by the telecoms and the banks, but the industry and agriculture related services are not that strong. And therefore, if we put all this together, how does it change the structure of the Ghanaian economy? We know that will not happen in 120 days, and that is obvious. But the indicators should be pointing to that fact. The stability we are having today is good. Can we sustain it? Today, CD is gaining grounds. Inflation dropped a little bit, but not so much. Other indicators are pointing to a positive direction. My little concern, though, has to do with the policy rate. Policy rate is still around 28% or so. So it means that interest rates will still be quite high. So, and for business people, it's access to money at a cheaper possible or competitive price is key to them. So if you still have policy rate of about 28%, there is something that has to be done. So within the 120 days, some of the pointers have been good, but we need to really monitor to ensure that ultimately it's going to impact on the productive sector, the manufacturing and agriculture. I like the initiatives that have come up within the 120 days. The 24-hour economy has made, we've met them, we've had discussions, and they are making agribusiness related and industry related issues as key part of the 24-hour economy strategy. And for me, that is very important. If we do very well in our value chains, and produce the bulk of our inputs locally to feed our factories, then we depend less on imported products. In that case, you can manage the price, and we can sustain the gains you are making in the macroeconomic environment for now. So the 24-hour economy and how it's being approached, the productivity aspect, especially relating it to manufacturing, industry, and then the linkage of the two, for me, that is positive. So I think all in all, the indicators appears reasonably good, but the coming days and months will clearly indicate how far we go.
Thank you.
Assessment, I'm sure will be done again, and they will know the best way. I would like to see the manufacturing sector, for example, the contribution going up. I would like to see agriculture and manufacturing contributing a lot more. And then the service that relates to these two coming up quite strongly as well.
Thank you, Seth. I know you have a lot to say because this is the part of the discussion that AGI would be expected to say much. We are talking the economy. Let me come to Franklin. How did you assess the economic promises? Are you able to give us any numbers like you did for the governance? And how do you rate Mr. Mahama in the 120 days as far as these economic promises are concerned?
Well, thank you very much. On the economy, we counted 10 promises, right? What we have here essentially is that about, I think 5 of them have been completed. The 4 of them are in progress and 1 not completed. But you see, as Honorable Ponkruma obviously suggested, I think it is important to go beyond these and then do some deep dives. So let me um, actually take off from where one of the points Honorable Ponkruma made concerning the women's banking. And I totally agree with him. I mean, yes, there's been an allocation, but the question you should be asking is exactly how much is really enough. I mean, 51 million to this seed funding. Uh, I'm not too sure I mean, I really, I'm not too sure if it's that enough. And besides, if the government are taking this time to look at some initiatives that the previous administration worked with certain international institutions to establish, like the Development Bank of Ghana, you realize that the portfolio of the Development Bank of Ghana suggests, in fact, mandates that about 20% of its funds must go to women entrepreneurs. So right from the get-go, I would have thought that the government would have optimized that opportunity in the DBG structure and ensure that they build on it and then critically work on the interest rate as well. Because DBG basically lends to commercial entities, I think at 18%, which still makes what Seth talks about quite pretty high. Because by the time you are getting to the real rates, we are looking at almost 25, 30%. But I thought that the Women's Development Bank would probably not have been mentioned at all. But it's nice. I mean, Professor Fairwood, yeah, I totally understand. We need to genderize this conversation, but we also need to be making certain economic decisions that would mean that we are being efficient. So I would have thought that that women's thing, we still have made some propaganda with it, but then also say that, look, there's some money sitting already at the DBG. And for crying out.
Actually, what I wanted for women was the operationalization of the Gender Equity Committee in the Affirmative Action Act. That's what I wanted.
That's fine. I mean, it's just a spin-off. And so I would have thought that they would have optimized that, especially when we now know that the DBG itself spends almost 60% of certain allocations on administration. And I don't think that's an efficient way of using money. But then I like to also focus on the National Economic Dialogue. Contrary to what my good friend Oponkruma suggests, I think that, yes, it's just a conference that was held. And by the way, these comments are not because I took part in it, not at all. But I just have to say that I've seen some of the actions on the National Economic Dialogue actually reflect in the government's programs, especially in the budget. I mean, if the white paper is not yet out, but if you take a critical look at for instance, the amendments that public financial amendment that were suggested, the recommendations on overhauling the PFM Act and the Fiscal Responsibility Act were reflected in the fiscal policy objectives that underpin the medium-term development targets. But the minister actually has proceeded to repeal the Act 982 and merge it with the Public Financial Management Act. That's the amended Act of 2025. The amendments to the Public Financial Management also includes, in fact, and this is also stated in the budget, a primary support of about 1.5% of GDP, a debt ceiling of about 45% of GDP by 2034, and then establishing an independent fiscal council and other tighter measures for suspending fiscal rules. You see, this is important because, and for me, even going beyond what has been done, is to suggest that a creature like the Fiscal Council should not be made up of political apparatchiks or yes men. Because the moment you do that, you defeated the purpose of holding the Minister of Finance or any minister who goes berserk in check. It is important that people who really know their metal would be appointed. And that's why countries like Jamaica and I think even to some extent Kenya seems to have had some interesting fiscal responsibility initiatives that we need to copy. I also do think that in fact, there's also the no commencement certificate, no contract policy, which the Minister of Finance has started. and it's part of the recommendations to strengthening expenditure controls in the public sector. I think it is also important to mention, by the way, the no commencement certificate, no contract, for me, I think it's going to be, it's a sensible thing. The only challenge accompanying this one is that the minister is supposed to vet all projects or vet all contracts before they pass. I don't think he would have the capacity and the time to do all of that at all. I think also that there was this dialogue on the recommendations for reforming the ECG. Remember ECG? And Bernard, you were there. I think these conversations also came up strongly during the National Economic Dialogue. And indeed, you've seen the minister go forward to set up a committee to review whatever PSP interventions that was supposed to be made. I think it's also important to mention that the committee but there was a recommendation reforming the VAT system to reduce revenue leakages, also reflected in the budget statement, by the way. But in paragraph 288, you see that the Minister of Finance outlined the key parameters for reforming VAT after the technical assistance of the IMF has come to pass. By the way, while it is impressive, as we say, all of this, while it is impressive that some of these recommendations have found their way from the dialogue into the budget, we think they must be accompanied by serious government reforms. And why do we say this? If we take a point like, how do I put it, the whole idea of achieving a primary surplus of 1.5% GDP, the VAT reforms and all of that, they are wonderful. But did you know that we spend, on the tax expenditure on VAT for collecting VAT, for instance, about 70% of the tax collected under VAT. This is crazy. You don't even achieve efficiency by doing that, right? So it's important that we address that particular matter. You can't spend 70% of VAT proceeds of collecting VAT. I think it's important we look at that and then make all these very important adjustments. So I think clearly that some of these interventions we are seeing, but yeah, the point is right. We are yet to see the fruition of these things, but to the extent that the National Economic Dialogue has delivered on these very critical areas, we need to identify that and make the point.
All right.
Finally, I'd like to say that I think it's also important that you cannot be doing all of this stuff and then later come and organize what I call Munchendi type of procurement system. I mean, the DJAC type of procurement system. You cannot achieve it. Look, we analyzed over 1,500 contracts, I think between 2012 up to 2022, thereabout. 90% of these procurements, and they need to be appreciated. It just doesn't make sense, and most of them did not pass through the necessary systems. I think it's important that while we do these things, we take our time and look. By the way, I also need to state, Bernard, you predicated this part of the conversation on your job creation, employment, and what have you, which is very important. If you look at the flagship programs and the government that's undertaking, the big push, the Gold Board, the Women Development Bank, the National Apprenticeship Program, the Jumaura, 1 million coders, Agree for Economic Transformation, an agenda for feeding Ghana. All of this constitutes almost 19 billion Ghana cedis. Now, our worry at the money is that it's not the fact that these things are not nice. Banasa will tell you that all these employment creations things are just political. But we worry because where we are at this juncture, any money you spend must make sense, which means that the productivity element of that money must be taken into consideration. So if we are spending Jumaura, spending about 100 million on Jumaura and 100,000, 100 million on the 1 million coders. At least these two things, must be seen to be reflecting in some sort of productivity so that they can add to the value of the economy. I don't see these analysis being done at all. And right from the get-go, since we started this national employment, I think anytime the state is employing staff, it looks as if there's no sense of productivity. So we don't factor that in. And that's real our worry. So if you are going to spend almost 19 billion, by the way, on this flagship interventions, you need to be sure that you are targeting them specifically so that we are getting value in return. I think that the Gold Board thing, well, I was in
Franklin,
touch with
I
some
want to
immediately
thank you.
yesterday. Yeah, I
I
was
want to
quite
thank you
amazed
for
that
your
it is a
submission
small
on
scale
this.
sector that has produced so much gold. Well, then it's a good thing. But we should be careful. But the gold board, I still believe, runs the risk of turning into a cocoa board, where regulatory and administrative functions, and if you like, more or less participating in the market, and at the same time trying to pretend to be efficient.
Thank you, Franklin.
Yeah, so I
Thank you, Franklin. Can you hear me, Franklin?
we need to be careful how we go about this. So for us, these interventions, notwithstanding, they must reflect in the structural transformation of the country. Because look, we need to. Well, we've heard, for instance, we heard the government say that they're going to ramp up efforts in the oil sector, but we need to get that quickly, because if we don't do that, people are finding alternatives to oil, right? Even lithium, which is another thing. I'm sure you know the discussion right now. I think two Chinese companies decided not to invest again recently because the price dropped.
All right.
So while we have these resources sitting down, we think we have money. We don't. People are thinking further and further, using AI to do amazing things. All that we are saying is that let's be pragmatic, be prudent, and make sure that every CD you spend must return some value.
Thank you very much.
So I'll leave that for now.
Thank you very much, Franklin Kujo, for you took a lot of time on this. That suggests that you are very interested in jobs and economy. So that means that I don't know, Kujo, I'm coming to you because in Parliament you are also on the newly created Committee on Economy and Development. So I suspect you have a lot to say on this. This is the second part, and we're looking at issues of taxes, jobs, basically on the economy. Let's hear your submission, Kujo.
Thanks, Bernard. And let me start from taxes. So about 3 taxes were advertised that they will be abolished by now: e-levy, COVID, and betting. If you look at the incidence of the tax of e-levy and betting, it's actually on persons who elect to participate in a particular transaction. COVID was put into the value-added tax framework, and as Franklin has rightly mentioned, the incidence of that tax affects literally everybody. The COVID levy also rather yields a lot more, if you look at the numbers, than these items. However, the government has taken away e-levy and betting, but has opted to keep COVID with this cover story that IMF and VAT rationalization. And I think, as Chuma Kwabwa mentioned, if the government really wants to take off COVID now, it can do it. So let's be clear about that one. Then the government also did emissions and insurance. And these were taxes that were on paper but were not being collected. But it is added to this enterprise to create a certain impression that so many taxes have been removed. But apart from removing the ones that were being collected and the ones that were not being collected, and how we narrate it is that 3 more new incidents of taxation have been introduced. The growth and sustainability levy that has been extended, the growth and sustainability levy on mining, which has been increased, and then the special import levy that has also been extended. So if you look at the tax arrangements that the government has done, if you look into the numbers, we're of the view that you will see a gap in the revenue structure of the country, which gap has not been properly addressed still. There's this story of, we are reducing the withholding tax threshold, but I'm sure if you've listened to many of the tax analysts, they'll tell you that that is really a bogus argument, because you cannot replace a permanent revenue handle, which you can program for revenue security for even a decade, with a one-off cutback on your own holding account. So that does not really add up in that area. Be that as it may, whenever taxes, even 1 or 2 or 3, are reduced, even if it affects 3 or 4 people, the incidence is positive for them. It reminds me of 2017 when we removed about 17 different taxes, and tax to GDP ratio, if I'm correct at the time, moved up from about 11% to 13%. So I think there's general optimism that the removal of these taxes, assuming they were on productive sectors of the economy, will translate into a certain freeing up of the cost of production, and therefore relatively edge up production. The flip side is that the other elements that affect production, like cost of electricity, rather gone up, about 14%. Once you have the special import levy extended as well, then you know that imported items will continue to, may I say, be burdened under that. Then there was a promise to take away taxes on agric and industrial imports. And this is a big deal because that one affects productivity in the area of agric and in the area of industry. But I'm sure, as you heard Franklin allude to, though it has been mentioned in terms of real enactment to make it happen, it hasn't happened yet. So if you look at the tax arrangements of the government, it appears as though the government has gone for quick fixes that give it applause, but where it hits productivity and the cost of production, those ones have not been attended to. In fact, the ones that hit productivity have been maintained. And it remains to be seen whether that will necessarily lead to increased productivity or not. I take something like the 24-hour economy. I've heard some analysts say, oh, there's nothing wrong if the policy framework is not out yet. I've heard others say they are still engaging us, etc. If we go back to the theme of marking the government by their own commitments and their own scripts, the president told us the finance minister will make it available. The finance minister told us that the coordinator, Mr. Guzitano, will make it available. Parliament rose and Mr. Guzitano did not make it available. In fact, in the 2024 fiscal framework, apart from you hearing of 24-hour economy in the policy side, you don't see any fiscal allocations, even within target ministries, that they can say that this is an increase in our budgetary allocation because we think that we're going to be providing 1 or 2 or 3 services for the 24-hour economy. We're not saying there should be a budget line for 24-hour economy, but even in the places where, or in the ministries where you expect its implementation, you are not seeing any fiscal allocations there. So again, it remains to be seen whether the 24-hour economy will birth any significant results in the year 2025. And interestingly, if you look at the Ghana Statistical Service projections, which have been adopted by the Finance Ministry in the budget, you will find that their projection is that the 24-hour economy will only contribute 0.1% of GDP growth to, I think, manufacturing and industry. And you begin to get a sense of how the rhetoric matches the substance on the ground. Take something like the Women's Development Bank, which is a big deal for a lot of women. And it was a big policy matter before the election because both parties, we on the MPP manifesto side, and then our colleagues on the NDC side, spent a lot of time trying to model around it. We were of the view that what you need to do is to make a fund available, which fund can be accessed by some of the existing institutions. The development bank, savings and loans entities could tap into that fund. As against be lending to these women has not come in. And then you discount that even by how much of it will be repaid. How many branches are you going to run? Even if you are going to cluster the districts, out of 262 across the country. And therefore, what does it cost you to operate each of these ones? So if you put all of those together, our modeling, if you put all of those together, our modest modeling is that you need about 1.5 billion cedis to operate a meaningful, or to set up and operate a meaningful women's development bank. And it is clearly because the government recognizes it will struggle to do this. That's why they've played this game of 51 million preparatory or seed funding. And even that one, you cannot find which institution has accessed the black ink that has been printed on the white paper. You'll find it in the budget, but which institution has accessed it and has started the preparatory work. So again, that is at large. My biggest interest is on the jobs programs. So for all of these job programs, I've been trying to scout out, and when Parliament resumes, we will be, requesting formally for the program documents. You see, from our experience in government, where we succeeded and where we failed, You can have instances where programs are launched and a clear program document with the KPIs, the allocations, the targets, the qualifying criteria, you struggle to find. And that is the beginning of chaos. Because what happens is that the guy behind, as a Mankese district who is supposed to implement it, once that program document is not clear, who qualifies, how much, what are the KPIs, what are the targets, you will begin to find different interpretations in different places. And that is what then translates sometimes into this thing of political slash funds, where money is voted into some of these jobs programs. Manasseh has done some work on it in times past. Some of them end up becoming scandals because the clear definition from the beginning and the clear governance framework around it is missing. So take the Ejumewura, the National Apprentice Program, etc. Today, I don't know if you have got copies of it, but as we have been scouting, you cannot find copies of the program documents with the allocations and the KPIs and the qualifying criteria. And those are necessary ingredients for success. And that's why I say we won't come poo-pooing everything. We'll come with reflections of people who've succeeded and failed in certain areas. Now, let me go back to the National Economic Dialogue. I will respectfully disagree with my senior. He's an old boy of Pope John. He didn't mention that to you. I'll respectfully disagree with him that the items that he picks today as evidence of the National Economic Dialogue success, I respectfully disagree that is the evidence of success of the National Economic Dialogue. Because, for example, when you go into the white paper on the Senchi dialogue, or even the full report on the Senchi dialogue, you'll find about 90% of these things there. You'll find them there. So you ask yourself a question, did we need a National Economic Dialogue to rehash a good number of the ideas from Senchi? When you go through the manifestos of the political parties, even including the NDC, you will find a good number of these ideas there. Things like commencement certificates, which for good reason, the PFMA said should be limited to capital expenditure. If today you want to extend it to cover goods and services and even district assemblies, you've essentially ground the government to a halt. Because what it means is that when an assembly somewhere in Asamankese wants to do something, they have to write to the finance minister to get permission before they can enact that one. It has its own challenges in there. I want to touch on two things, just two quick things that Seth raised, which were not part of this set of 10. So the Export Development Council. How different is the mandate of the Export Development Council from the Ghana Export Promotion Authority? How different is the mandate? And the reason is that, you see, sometimes when you win power and you have such goodwill, you want to create new institutions. I remember when we won power and we wanted to allocate $1 million per constituency. We created Northern, Middle, Coastal Belt. It becomes a new bureaucracy around it. And by the time you are done, you will still find projects today that haven't been paid for. I'm being bloody honest with you. So the Export Development Council may sound like a new idea aimed at promoting exports or seeking the development of exports. When I was young, we had Kofi Export. The idea is not new. And today we have the Ghana Export Promotion Authority. What is different from that? So you can create it and tick it, but have you done anything differently? Finally, macro stability. Governments take credit and take blame for macro stability, especially if a good chunk of it is impacted from external development. We had a lot of flack when the macro was shaken significantly by some of the developments on the global scene. Today, you are seeing stability being boosted. It started getting to the second half of 2024. It is continuing. It is also being impacted by some other items. What matters most is the specific interventions that the government itself, beyond the international development, is introducing to hold macro stability so that businesses can predict some more and can run their budgets accordingly.
Thank you, Kojo. I notice you have a lot to say, but for want of time, this is still the Anatomy of a Returnee Presidency. We are taking our last contribution on the second round with Manasseh. Then I'll start the last round with Manasseh. So Manasseh, you're going to have two chances. You've been too quiet. We're live on a number of platforms. If you're watching and have something to say, please put your comment in the stream. This program is brought to you by the auspices of the Gold Coast University. And if you are ready to lead across borders and boardrooms, introducing the Global Executive MBA from the University of the Gold Coast UGC, a world-class program for bold visionary leaders like you. Study right here in Accra, then take your learning global with immersive experiences in Dubai and Switzerland in partnership with Northwood University and University of Bolton. This isn't just another MBA, it's a passport to global leadership designed for business professionals who want flexibility, prestige, and impact. The 14-month hybrid format combines powerful online learning with unforgettable international residencies. Apply today. Go online, ugc.edu.gh or call 0263 888 Manasseh, when I looked in the list of promises under the taxes, jobs, and economy, I saw three things I know you'll be interested in. A Jumera apprenticeship and coders. These youth development job creation programs, I know you have done a lot of work on. So not to skew the discussion, what are your thoughts on Mohammed's economic promises and what do you make of some of these job programs that he has launched?
Well, Bernard, the first thing I am interested in the scrap, that the promise to scrap import ban on salvage vehicles, because I'm here to buy tear rubber. So when this policy was on, it was affecting some of us, the ability to get some second-hand cars and drive around. You are very right. When I heard them launching these things, what came to mind was the work I did on JIDA, now Youth Employment Agency, which is still the case. They say 1 million coders. So I asked myself, who is going to employ this 1 million? Who is going to count them? My experience in the past shows that the number is thrown out there. When you take your time to investigate, you would realize that some take advantage of these numbers to enrich themselves. There's a contract that survived the JIDA scandal. That's the Zoom Lion contract with YEA. And I've been fighting this for 12 years now. You go to the YEA and ask them, how many people are on this program? They don't have the figures. How many people do you pay for? 45,000 every month. And YEA officials have come out to say, and I'm quoting the current MPP General Secretary, Justin Kudiafimpong, that they did their head count and got about 38,000. Even the 38,000, many of them were engaged without recourse to the YEA. So those with appointment letters were actually less than the 38,000. But Zoom Lion presents 45,000 they pay. And about close to 80% of the amount allocated goes to the company, and then the people go home with practically nothing. And this has been the disturbing rhythm with some of these policies. So it is not enough to launch them, but we've had issues in the past of RLG, Zoom Lion, Better Ghana, all of them getting in to take advantage of these ones. So I'm not very enthused until we get to the implementation. Ban illegal mining, launch tree and water initiatives. I've done stories about the tree planting in the northern Ghana under SADA, and I know it was a failure. So I want to know what is done differently. As far as I'm concerned, there is nothing that is being done differently from the past with regards to illegal mining. It is still the same. Get soldiers in there, arrest a few people, and it's even worse now that the government has made it a policy not to prosecute the Chinese. I'm saying Chinese because they are the foreigners that are often asked to go home peacefully. So when I hear that a raid caused the arrest of maybe 5 Ghanaians, 10 Chinese, then you know that the Ghanaians are going to be prosecuted, the Chinese are going home. This for me doesn't make sense. So illegal mining, I'm yet to see anything. Women's Development Bank, I think some have spoken about it. I would skip that one. Prepare for 24-hour economy. When this policy or so-called policy was introduced, I said at the time that it didn't make sense, and I think I still stand by it. A 24-hour economy should be a byproduct of a good economy. When the economy grows, if I'm producing, let's say I'm a printer, and I get so much work that the 8-hour shift won't be enough, I will employ another shift to work throughout the night. But I can't just get up and say, well, the government wants us to work for 24 hours. So let me change my production schedule to working in the night, and then government is going to give me incentives. So if I have something to print during the day, I can decide to do that at night and get an incentive. So I'm yet to see anything substantial about this 24-hour economy. Remove taxes on agri and industrial imports. I think it's a good thing if it is done, because agri is so crucial to our economy that if we are at least able to feed ourselves, we will be making a headway. Anytime I fly to Burkina Faso and then I'm about to land, I see something like a desert. The climate or the environment there is even worse than what we have in northern Ghana. But if you stand in Bolgatanga, you see trucks bringing tomatoes, onions, and livestock to Ghana from Burkina Faso. So we cannot even feed ourselves with all the land we have. So we need that as an incentive to give to our producers. Then e-levy has been scrapped, but I think COVID-19 levy should also go. With all due respect, that levy was a fraudulent levy imposed on Ghanaians by the outgone administration. I have done some investigation on COVID-19 expenditure, and some of them, or a chunk of them, were not even needed. It was used as an opportunity to loot, because we paid hundreds of millions of cedis to just give to a business, a very shady business, to pour chlorine solution on the streets of Legon when those universities had been closed for up to 4 months. The question I asked the academics, the scientists in Legon, KNUST, Noguchi, and everywhere was it necessary? They said no. And at the time of these so-called fumigation exercises, the WHO had released a paper discounting them. Then the National Economic Dialogue, I think I'll let it slide because I did not follow whatever was discussed there keenly. But generally, I think that there is some goodwill, which the economists often respond positively, but that positive response may wane if the goodwill begins to dissipate. And for the goodwill to stay, certain things must be done. And also the body language of the administration should be one that is welcoming of business and investment. I recently saw people posting about why is Data Bank still on the list of financial institutions providing services to the government. And I said, well, it shows that the government isn't vindictive, because I think that if Data Bank were an NDC institution, and then from the government we have seen, it may not still be in business. So such things would give investors the confidence that, well, we have a government that would welcome us, even if they don't support us. And I think it should continue with all businesses, and then investment will respond appropriately.
Thank you, Manasseh. We're still live here on a number of TV channels and radio stations, as well as online. It's the
State to fund election collation logistics and equipment when served on the NCA board.
When we were on the NC, when I had
essentially the Anatomy of a Returnee President. We've done 2 rounds of commentary. For want of time, I'm going to compress the 3rd round in a very interesting way. I'm going to start with Manasseh because that's really the social sector. We've discussed already governance and anti-corruption and economy. We've heard from all our panelists. I want to end by asking my panelists to evaluate very briefly, not in more than 2 minutes, the president's promises which have to do with education, inclusion, social equity. So we're looking at things like no academic fees for first-year students, free tertiary for PWDs, Mahama Cares program for health, free sanitary pads, Black Star experience, probing of the VRA dam spillage, compensation for flood victims, and the rest of them. So Manasseh, I'm staying with you on that because I think you are still a student. You are a fellow at Harvard, if I'm not mistaken. How do you evaluate these attempts to ease the plight of students and also help people get access to education and health in a couple of minutes, Manasseh?
Well, I've moved from Harvard to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where I'm studying creative writing.
Okay.
But I'm studying for free. I'm on a scholarship, full scholarship. So what I'm about to say may sound contradictory because I'm against the paying of fees for first-year students at our universities. The problem is not because some people don't lack. My point has always been that there are people who cannot pay. And if I had a son or a daughter in the university today, I can pay their fees. Someone cannot pay. So let's make provisions for such people. When you go through the list, some of them are just populist. Some of them just to tick boxes. But the real impact will not be felt. I'm saying this because when you go to places that we have some of these scholarships, if you come to the US, Harvard and then where I am now, University of Nebraska, are miles apart. But the infrastructure, you are not going to see any vast difference when you just walk around the campus. You get a basic things. Sometimes the difference is if you want an academic paper, and when I was at Harvard, when I put in my ID, it gives you access to everything. But in this university, they do not subscribe to some things. But the basic things you need to learn, you'll find them everywhere. Back in Ghana, our educational system is crumbling. You go to the basic school, some are still studying on the trees. Now, a lot of the students who pass to go to the universities do so because cheating has become institutionalized. They pay money to be supported, final year students. But even at the universities, they lack so much that I think this investment should be put into helping upgrade the teaching and learning facilities there. And also we get something to take care of students who are unable to pay. But when we look at these populist social interventions, they will win you the vote. But in the long term, they don't help when a single class can have between 500 to 1,000 students being taught by one lecturer. I said that that kind of education is not fit for purpose. Where I'm going to school, the biggest class size I've had so far is about 12 in a class. It's because of my course, but other courses don't even have so many numbers. So if you have up to 1,000 students, they have a lecturer in front of them with a microphone as if he's speaking at a political rally. You are not going to get a best out of that. You could employ 3
cameras were there. Anytime we're against EC and MPP, they will come strongly and be supporting MPP and EC. And EC had nothing to do with that. We fought
it. But if you just pay their fees for 1 year, where are they going to get the money to pay second, third, fourth years? Assuming that you are doing that because they cannot pay. So for these social interventions, I am very skeptical about how they are going to help us politically. They'll win votes. To the masses, they'll be popular, but I have my reservations.
Thank you, Manasseh. Good luck with your PhD. We may take closing comments from you. I'm going in the reverse order on this one.
It is a master's.
Oh, it's not a PhD.
I'm not doing a PhD.
Well, I think you already have a PhD in writing. It's based on the things you write that I read, but that's a different story. I would end this round with Dr. Ofe Abuaje, so if you can hold on for me. I'd like to move to Franklin, then I'll come to Kojo, then I'll come to Seth before I end with Dr. Ofe Abuaje. So Franklin, again, what rubric did you use in evaluating these social promises, education, health, and the rest of it? In just 2 minutes, what is your assessment of Mr. Mahama after 120 days?
Well, I mean, so just about what do I see? About 6 of them basically, and so well, 3 of them more or less attained, but then 3 in progress and 1 not completed. But I think, in addition to all the comments that have been made by Manasseh and to some extent, actually, Professor Ofe Abuaje, I think for me, this in assessing how do I call it social services, we must obviously and always ensure that the issues around equity, access, and sustainability in the implementation of these interventions are actually quite taken into consideration. And I think it's important to also say that the underlying factors responsible or contributing to these social problems must be addressed. I don't, for instance, I think it is good to give free sanitary pads to our girls, but it's not a way to solve period poverty. Even if those who are not covered will still have to be purchasing due to the taxes that make them expensive. So for me, I think these are things that I think we need to be careful about the interventions and the side effects. Thank you.
Thank you, Franklin, for making it brief. Kojo, on the social sector, quick thoughts, inclusion, education, and the rest of them.
I think generally we've agreed that it's a bit early days. The kind of consultations that the administration has done is giving it a good breadth of information to work with. 3 things I think they need to look out for. One is to be able to find the resources to sustain the elements in this social space that they have promised. Another will be to ensure that the delivery mechanisms are executing flawlessly. I remember when we did free SHS, you can do computer placement, then you have a problem with delivery of the placement and chaos at the Independence Square. You can deliver, people are getting free education, but then you are having challenges with, let's say, accommodation, and people have to introduce double track, etc. So you need to get the delivery mechanisms to execute flawlessly, else you are going to find yourself, being blamed even when you wanted to do something very positive at the end of the day. And then finally, to do well to ensure that the resources that go into a lot of these social interventions stay at home. So if you are going to do sanitary pads, how much of those resources are going to China to import sanitary pads, and how much of it is going to feed local industry to produce sanitary pads? If you are going to do first year, fees at the tertiary level, yes, you have said it. Now it appears you flipped, and now you want to do refund. What is the implementation mechanism to ensure that halfway through we don't have gaps in terms of its implementation? So 3 things that I would share with the government, that those are the things that they should pay attention to.
Thank you very much, Kojo. Let's come to Kwabwa. From the business perspective, are you even interested in these social interventions, and how do you evaluate Mr. Mahama's performance on these promises?
Well, definitely it's of interest to us, the social interventions, but our position has always been that when it comes to social interventions, let's see how it is linked to impact local industries and local manufacturing and job creation. You may say, what has free fees, for example, got to do with industry? But if you put it all together, there are aspects that could always be linked to local industries and local businesses. The free sanitary part is a typical example. And as Honorable Kojo just said, we have to be sure that it is procured from local sources. And we've had the opportunity of engaging the Minister for Education, and he gave us the assurance. We've also been proactive to meet the Minister for Trade and Industry, and they've given us assurance that they will be procuring them from local sources. and I know that it was advertised. And when it was advertised, more than 170 applicants were there. So you can imagine. Meanwhile, local producers of sanitary pads, we only have about 4. So why 170 people applying to supply? And where are they going to get it from? How do you ensure that if the 170, some of them win, they are actually buying from local sources? Meanwhile, manufacturers also bid it. So are we going to have middlemen who are going to buy it from local manufacturers and supply? And what is the point? So I think that it's an idea that government want to help our young ladies with, but let's implement it in a way that supports local manufacturing and local industrial development. On the educational thing, I like the efforts that government made by having this educational forum, and not only having it in Accra, but also going to other parts of the country and soliciting ideas. So that is all positive. But what is important is that when some of these ideas are done, let's be sure that it is done for the long haul, sustainable. I think a regime change and different reforms altogether may not be the best unless there's value addition. So social interventions and social programs, we always have to ask whether we are adding more value by the interventions we make. I think that is very important. And then, as has been mentioned by Franklin and Kojo and the rest, the sustainability of these interventions are key. If we can't sustain it, why start? Or we have to have a sunset clause in this as well and say, we are only doing this for this period. So we are absorbing it in this particular year's budget, but subsequent year, this is how we are going to treat it. I think the long-term plan and the long-term sustainability of it is key. So this is what I would say in this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Makwabwa. And I think that's a good place to wrap us up. We've been discussing 120 days of the second coming of John Dramani Mahama, and we've called it the Anatomy of a Returnee President, evaluating a 120-day social contract. This has been brought to you under the auspices of the University of Gold Coast in their Vital Topics series 1.0 with a very interesting panel. We were kicked off by Dr. Estaufe Abuaji, who contextualized the challenge, looked at the promises, and gave some parameters for evaluating success. Panel included Manasseh Azure Awuni, who is an investigative journalist, Kojo Ponkroma, MP and politician. We also have Franklin Kujo, founder of Imani Africa, and Setu Makwabwa, CEO of the AGI. I'd like to announce that the next in the series of the Vital Topics series, that will be the 2.0, is the very interesting topic. Has the fourth estate of the realm been compromised? It's a very interesting question that has been posed. That event is on the 27th of June, and I suspect maybe a couple of people on this panel may be there as well. But watch out for that as announcements are made. A big thank you to the University of Gold Coast for bringing us together. They have a fantastic MBA program that if you want to be a global leader, you want to subscribe to, you can either go to ugc.edu.gh or call 0263 888 555. The Global Executive MBA, lead without borders. I'd like to say a big thank you to Bishop Gideon Titi Ofe, under whose auspices we've had this program, and to the very hardworking production team here who've made sure you've been able to hear us throughout the program. And apologies for not having two of our panelists, the Minister for Communication and Professor Bokpin, we could not reach as well. But on behalf of the team that put this together, thank you so much for watching today's program. We'll see you at the next edition on the 27th of June. Have a great day.
This is University of Gold Coast. For your MBA, MSc, and more, visit www.ugc.edu.gh. University of Gold Coast, building leaders for nations.
University of
This is University of Gold Coast. For your MBA, MSc, and more, visit www.ugc.edu.gh. University of Gold Coast, building leaders for nations.